It was the people in my life, the love and support that I received that allowed me to work my way through 19 years in prison without losing my mind or losing who I wanted to be. In fact, allowed me to be the best person I could be. So a lot of people have asked me, like, how do you support a loved one who's inside? How do you support a son or a brother or a sister? And what do you talk about? And these kind of basic ideas. And what I usually tell people is, it's about holding space. So whatever this person is going through, if we can hold space for them to talk about that, or also accept when sometimes they're not comfortable. Because there were things that were traumatizing that I didn't talk about, but people could tell. They were like, look, you don't sound okay. And the most I could say was, no, like, I'm not okay, but I can't talk about it now. And in a weird way, I think that was harder for them, but it's trusting the person to come to you when things are ready, basically, when things have come to fruition or things have kind of like gone through the process. It's also, some people say, well, I don't want to hear about this or that. So I would say, ask each person, say, look, what do you want to hear about? What do you feel comfortable hearing about? Or like, do you want to hear about my problems, or are you stuck in your own kind of place? Like for me, hearing about other people's problems was always comforting. It gave me something to think about and work on in a way to support somebody else, which even if I couldn't make that big of a difference, I could at least get out of my own head. I could at least be there for somebody else in one moment. But otherwise, I wanted to hear about everything. I wanted to hear about all the good you were doing, all the experiences. People were like, well, I feel bad. I just went to, the beach. I was like, I want to hear about that. Like, I want to hear about your experience at the beach. I want to hear about the joy. I want to hear about how good it felt, because that connected me to the outside world. That connected me to a future that I knew would be mine one day. Whereas if people always kind of like stayed quiet or like stayed out of the way, well, then the outside world stopped seeming so amazing. It was like, well, why, what do I even care? Like, it's all just the same. But no, living those kind of amazing vicarious moments really helped me get through. And some people say they don't want to hear it. But the one thing I didn't want to hear was when people would say, oh, when you get out, we're going to do this. And I don't know why, but that just triggered something in me. Every time they said, well, we're going to do this, or we're going to go to the beach together, we're going to whatever, it just drove me crazy, because it connected me to not being there and wanting to be there. And I don't know why it was so different to hear about someone's beach trip and thinking it was great and being happy for them. And when they started talking about us doing it together, it just crushed me. The other thing was the kind of unexpected ways in which time happened. So I always thought, once I got to the halfway point of my sentence, so I had a 32-year sentence, and with good time, that was about like 14 and a half years, something like that. So I thought once I get to that point, it'd be good. It'd be all smooth sailing and downhill from there. But instead what happened was I had a complete breakdown at the halfway point. Like, I reached the halfway point and I just could not stop crying, and I didn't want to get out of bed because I was like, I cannot possibly do this again. Like, I can't do this amount of time again. And I felt broken, and I felt ashamed of myself, and I didn't want to tell people. And I went through a real struggle. And it was only because I was able to finally open up to people and say, hey, I'm really struggling. This is how I felt. That I was able to get through it, because I could get the support from other people. I could get their understanding, and they could just hold space for me. Because half the time when I was going through something, there was nothing anybody else could do. It wasn't about fixing a problem. It wasn't about making things different. It was about knowing that someone was willing to care and like be there with me in this discomfort. Be there in this place where we didn't have to have answers, but just felt loved and felt connected and felt seen. Because I guess that was one of the hardest parts about prison, is not feeling seen and not feeling heard. Because you have, kind of a certain apathy in the culture, both with prisoners and with staff. And when somebody really connects with you and somebody really listens and really cares, I mean, that can change the world. It's like humanizing a person. So when people talk about support, they're practical things. Like, it does help to have money. Like, one of the things that allowed me to really better myself was that I was never struggling with, how am I going to afford a cup of coffee? Because I had people who would send me money and people would take care of me. And what that meant was I wasn't scrambling to make sure I had enough to eat at night, and I wasn't scrambling to do a hustle to do something else. Like, I did hustles because I wanted to be able to support myself as much as possible, but that also meant putting money away so that when I got out, I had money in my account. So I actually had money on the little debit card they gave me, because I was terrified of getting out and having absolutely nothing. So having access to resources, having access to books, having access to education is huge. And I was incredibly lucky that my mom could afford to get me an education, that I could go to Ohio University, that I could do all these correspondence classes. And it took 15 years, but I got a degree. On the other hand, there were people who didn't have those resources, but had people who wanted to push for them anyways. So one guy, he wanted to get a college education, but he couldn't afford college, but he found somebody who would buy him textbooks. So we got all the textbooks for a basic, liberal arts degree, and we went through the classes. And I tutored him in every one of these classes because I wanted to make sure, even if he couldn't afford it, he could have the experience. And at the end of that, he realized that he was just as smart as a kid who went to college. He was just as capable as any other kid, and he went into it not really believing that was true, like doubting himself and doubting his intelligence and doubting what he'd be able to accomplish. So that process, even though there was no piece of paper or no official, whatever going along with it, allowed him to see himself in a different way, and is probably going to change the way that he lives his life. So I think education can be empowering, and any way you can support somebody by providing them education, sending them magazines or books, or again, I'm not sure, it depends state by state, but it's believing in people and then kind of putting the foundation under that, right? Believing them and telling them what they can do, and then also helping them find that out themselves, about empowering them rather than just kind of lifting them up. And that was where I was so lucky, because I had people who would support me and make sure I had opportunities. I also had people who would hold me to account and immediately be like, no, that's BS. Like, that's not okay. You need to do better. And I need that in my life. I need friends who will call me on my stuff. I need people who will absolutely hold me accountable and not let me get away with anything, because that doesn't serve anybody. I don't get better if I get away with a bunch of stuff, or I can be lazy, or I can blame other people. No, I need people to say, look, you're feeling sorry for yourself. That's not okay. Go do something. Go do something nice for somebody else rather than feeling sorry for yourself. Or, hey, you're blaming that person. You're responsible for your actions. Like, they may have started that situation, but you're responsible for the way you responded. And I need that. Like, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be the person I am. I'd be probably, still feeling sorry for myself, or still justifying, or doing all the things I was doing when I was 16 and 17. So the people that have helped me and supported me and guided me, that's been a big part of it. And as much as anything, it's been the connection. So like, my mom ran a Facebook page for me, which meant that I was able to connect with the community. I would write essays and they would get out to the community, and I would get comments and she would send the comments in, or people would sign up on JPay or send me a letter. They would connect with me because of what I put out into the world. And that was amazing, because again, I felt unseen and unheard in prison, and all of a sudden I had a lifeline out to the world. So it's a really special thing if you can help people feel seen and heard and humanized. Because again, we often get treated like we're not human. We often get dehumanized and treated as less than. And just that moment of somebody connecting and saying thank you, or asking a question, or giving advice, whatever it is, that human interaction really made it okay. So I'd say if you have a loved one or a friend or somebody you care about that's locked up, just do what you can. Just show up in whatever ways you can and be really honest and set boundaries. If there's a limit, tell them there's a limit. If there's, a complication, tell them there's a complication. You don't have to stop living your life. Nobody wants you to stop living your life. Like, I want you to live your life, because that's how I feel better, because I hear about your successes, and I even hear about your struggles, but I'm able to be there and support you with them. So it's really been about just kind of allowing other people to live their lives and allowing them to, push me to live my best life.